It is overtime here again on Old Favorite Friday, talking about incredible classic beers. And if you've been following us for the 3+ years we've now been doing this series, you would have seen Samuel Smith come up a bunch of times. We've done Taddy Porter, we've done their chocolate stout, we've done many of their beers, their winter warmer. And the one we have not done yet, and one of the ones that's available down here that we haven't done yet that I absolutely adore, is their India Ale. Now, this is an English-style IPA, and a beer they've been making for a very long time at Samuel Smith. This is a classic. The IPA comes from the English brewing tradition. The IPAs that we're drinking now in the United States, the ones that are most prevalent here in the United States, are not even reminiscent of this kind of IPA, this classic style of English IPA. And you can kind of see right away from the color of this thing that it's got this deep amber to orangish color to it. The real defining difference, well, one of the many defining differences between these two styles of beer, the American IPA and the English style, is the malt character of the English IPA, which is much, much stronger. You're getting caramel malts, you're getting toffee, you're getting bready, biscuit, all those flavors that you're just not really seeing in the United States with IPAs being made these days. And you also have a much more of a focus on more herbal, floral, earthy kind of hops, which are traditionally the hops they were using in England, hundreds of years ago for most of the beers that were being produced. So instead of getting out that citrus and things of that nature, we're picking up that floral, those earthy hop aromas. So those are two main differences between the two styles. And I understand why we've gone more to this, all tropical fruit, low bitterness, kind of really soft, supple IPAs in the U.S. But I think it's interesting because this also has not super high bitterness. It's not like a classic American West Coast IPA that's super bitter. This has, more of a restrained bitterness component, even though it's still there. Definitely more bitter than a lot of like the East Coast or hazy IPAs that we're drinking now in the U.S. And in fact, I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised by the amount of bitterness in this beer because I like bitterness in an IPA. I was expecting it actually to be a little bit lower than it is here. And one of the reasons is that I don't know when this beer was bottled. So as anyone that knows IPAs knows that if a beer sits in a bottle for a long period of time, hop aroma, flavor, and even bitterness will fade over time. And because there's no date code on this, I don't know how long this beer's been sitting on the shelf. And going to a local, bottle shop or things of that nature, sometimes beers sit for 6 months to a year, which can really, really change the flavor of the beer. To me, not knowing when this was actually produced, but tasting getting all the aromas, the flavors, the bitterness that's still in this beer, I would say this is relatively fresh. I'd say this is probably 2 to 3 months old at the most, at the high end, because there is that nice bitterness component. I'm getting those floral and those earthy hops, those herbaceous hops. I'm actually picking up a little bit of like a black tea kind of character here, which I think is really pleasant. It's a flavor that you're not going to pick up a lot in American IPAs. To go along with this, you're getting this kind of orangey marmalade flavor that I'm picking up. So there is a little bit of citrus that's probably coming from the hops they're using. It's not dominant, but it's like an undertone of the flavor profile here. We're also picking up that honey biscuit malt, like I mentioned earlier. And it's a really nice combination of those things, giving us a flavor combination that you just don't see a lot these days. I'm a malt. I like malt-forward beers. I like beers that have more of a classic IPA as far as like the hop profile flavor. So this is really, really right up my alley. And it's made by a great brewery. And it's almost similar to the Scholl's Pale Ale from Smutty Nose that we did last week, which was more of an English-style pale ale. And I was kind of going on and saying how I wish people were making more beers like this because I think that I wish there was a market for it. Even if there really isn't, I hope that there will be in the future because it's when we limit ourselves to the different kind of beer flavor profiles, I think we all kind of lose when we all get very monotonous in the kind of things that people want to drink. Whereas this kind of opens up that flavor profile to different things, different experimentation, and also to be able to reintroduce classic styles that used to be the norm. They used to be the thing that everyone looked to and looked up to and tried to replicate. And we've moved past some of those classic styles, and not because they're not good, but because the flavor of the week has changed. But there's still a lot of meat on the bone here. This beer is really, really good. It's extremely drinkable at 5%, and it's got a ton of complexity. This is another beer that would go really, really well with food. We see that a lot with these classic beer styles where they're not looking to hit you over the head with one flavor profile when they can complement different foods, because they're not trying to be one thing. If you're trying to make a beer that just tastes like lemonade, it's one dimensional. It's going to have limited utility with pairing with different kinds of foods. But when you're drinking a beer that has floral components and black tea and picking up a little bit of honey and caramel, things of that nature, there's tons and tons of things and ways that you can utilize those flavor profiles to kind of compare or contrast to different food types. So, what I would do with this one, I mean, listen, this is an English IPA. You can just go the classic fish and chips. It's really, really nice there. You have more of a soft mouthfeel here, what will complement kind of the crunchy nature of the fish and chips. Also, you have that vinegar there. There's not any really kind of like tang here. So, some of the earthy components and the hops will work really well with that. I also think that being a kind of a medium-bodied beer, I think you could go with something like a salmon with like a honey Dijon crust would go really well. And mustard would go really well with this beer, I believe. And the fattiness and the richness of salmon could go well with more of a medium-bodied IPA that has some richness. It can kind of draw out some of those smoky, rich flavors because you have that honey and that biscuit and that caramel that's going alongside of it. Really great brewery in Samuel Smith. I mean, I believe, featured every beer that's available from Samuel Smith. I think we've now done for Old Favorite Friday down here. I might be missing one or two. There's a couple I know of that are just not available down here anymore, or they've been in and out of the market. And that just goes to show you how great a brewery is when basically their entire portfolio that I can get my hands on, I should say, is a beer that I want to talk about and I want to feature and I want other people to be reminded of how great that this brewery and these beers are. Guys, thank you very much for joining me again. Please continue to tell us about the beers that you like, that you're drinking for Old Favorite Friday. Please poke around the channel, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. We really, really appreciate it. We love talking with you guys about incredible classic beers. It's what we're really passionate about. So thank you guys very much, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.